Hello and welcome to the Homeland Security Grant Program FY 2022 Reallocation Overview webinar presentation. This presentation will review the following topics: the Homeland Security Unit mission and a brief overview of the Homeland Security Grant Program. We will discuss the 2022 Reallocation Award timeline and what to expect. We'll touch on where to find and how to complete your grant application, as well as other supplemental materials that may be required depending on your request. And finally, we'll wrap up the presentation discussing opportunities available for technical assistance as you build your application materials. So before we dive into the grant materials themselves, just a brief overview on who the Homeland Security Unit is and what our mission is for the state of Vermont. So the Homeland Security Unit is a small unit nested under the Department of Public Safety within the state of Vermont. And the unit's goal and mission is to support federal, state, local, and private sector efforts to prevent, protect against, and prepare for threats and acts of terrorism against the state and its visitors. The Homeland Security Unit offers a variety of grant opportunities, two of which are nested under the Homeland Security Grant Programs issued by the Department of Homeland Security Federal Emergency Management Agency, also known as FEMA. The two programs under HSGP are the State Homeland Security Grant Program, which we will discuss in depth today, as well as the Operation Stone Garden grant program offered to assist in Border Patrol operations. Eligible entities under the State Homeland Security Grant Program are local units of government defined as a county, municipality, city, town, township, local public authority, school district, special district, interstate district, council of governments, regional or interstate government, entity or agency, or instrumentality of a local government, as well as an Indian tribe or authorized tribal organization, a rural community, unincorporated town or village, or other public entity. State agencies are also eligible to participate in this grant program. Switching gears a bit here, let's take a look at the 2022 Reallocation Award timeline. Beginning November 3rd, 2024, the 2022 Reallocation Notice of Funding Opportunity was released. The open application period runs for just about a month, with a due date of December 6th, 2024 at 5:00 p.m. Following the application period closing, the Homeland Security Unit will complete an internal review of applications for eligibility and completeness, at which time the applications will be passed on to the Homeland Security Working Group for scoring, prioritization, and final selections throughout the month of December and into early January. In the January and February timeframe, the Homeland Security Unit will release determination notices to all recipients and will begin the agreement process with applicants selected for funding. Once agreements have been executed, subrecipients will have until August 2025 to complete their projects, at which time the period of performance will come to a close. After reviewing the timeline of this funding opportunity, should you decide that your proposed project could be completed in the appropriate time frame, you may begin preparing your grant application materials. All necessary application materials, including the request for proposal, application, eligibility information, and allowable projects and costs, can be found on the Homeland Security Unit website at the link provided on this slide. When navigating to the Homeland Security Unit webpage, you will come upon this home page, which shows a variety of grant opportunities that we offer, as well as other contact and reference materials you may want to look into. For the purpose of this particular program, you will want to select the State Homeland Security Grant Program button. Once you have selected the appropriate grant program page, it will bring you to the list of application materials, reference materials, and additional resources that might be helpful to you in building out your application. Once you feel all of your application materials and additional supplemental materials are complete and have been signed when applicable, the application deadline is Friday, December 6th, 2024 at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Proposals received after this date and time will not be eligible for consideration, and you will receive an email notification verifying that your email was received after the deadline due date. We recommend, to ensure that your application was received on time, following up with an additional email outside of the email that has your application materials to ensure that we did receive it. That way we can work through any technical difficulties that may have occurred in delivering the actual materials themselves. To facilitate processing completed grant applications and supporting documentation, please email the Homeland Security Grant inbox at dps.hsugrants@vermont.gov. When reviewing your materials prior to submission, please ensure that the following items are complete. Requested projects must meet all requirements listed in the application RFP, so be sure to review that a time or two through to make sure that you are meeting all of the various requirements and that you are submitting all of the necessary supplemental materials based on the type of request you are submitting. If your request is submitting equipment, there is a requirement that equipment must be listed on the FEMA authorized equipment list and be allowable per the State Homeland Security Grant Program. Additionally, your application must describe the need for the proposed project and the gaps that it will be filling. And lastly, and most importantly, your application must explain how the proposed investments nexus to terrorism. Because this is a Homeland Security grant related program, all projects, regardless of the intent or if it is assisting in other hazards, there does need to be a way to tie the project back to responding to, preparing against, preventing terrorism, etc. So a bit more here on the nexus to terrorism. A requirement of this grant program is that all applications explain how the proposed project is related to terrorism. The HSGP funding supports investments that improve the ability of jurisdictions nationwide to do one or more of the following things: prevent a threatened or an actual act of terrorism, protect citizens, residents, visitors, and assets against the greatest threats that pose the greatest risk to the security of the United States, mitigate the loss of life and property by lessening the impact of future catastrophic events, and/or responding quickly to save lives, protect property and the environment, and meet basic human needs in the aftermath of a catastrophic incident. When reviewing and creating your application materials, please be sure to keep in mind these eligibility requirements. You must be eligible for funding as outlined in the funding eligibility section of the RFP. So either be a local unit of government and/or a state agency. The applicant must not be listed on the suspended and debarred list. The applicant must not be listed on the DPS restricted parties list. You, as the applicant, must be NIMS compliant according to the current Vermont implementation plan found on the Vermont Emergency Management website. Applicants must have a valid UEI number through the System for Awards Management, also often referred to as SAM.gov. Your entity must have submitted a financial risk assessment survey in the last 12 months. If you have not done so, you will want to complete that prior to submitting your application to ensure your eligibility. Applicants must meet eligibility requirements under the section, "What can I apply for?" in the request for proposal. Applicants must also read and comply with various federal regulations regarding general procurement, written procurement standards, conflict of interest, and minority business, women's business enterprise, and labor surplus area firms, just to name a few. Please be sure to refer back to the RFP listed on our website for additional eligibility requirements. After reviewing and confirming your eligibility for this grant program, the following items will be application materials that all applicants, regardless of the type of request or amount of request your agency is submitting. You must complete the application file submitted as the Excel document. Please do not submit it in a PDF format, as that Excel document is used during the scoring and prioritization portion following the application submission. You will need to complete and be sure to sign the required signature page. Please submit this as a PDF document with a hard signature. A typed name will not be accepted as a successful signature on that form. Another item is the certificate of insurance with showing your current coverage. A note here is to please list the Vermont Department of Public Safety as the certificate holder. And finally, any supporting documentation as required on the following slides based on your specific project. As we walk through the remainder of this presentation and the additional required materials that may be required of you as an applicant, please understand that this list is only for those that have projects applicable to the itemized request. First, if your project is too large for your agency to complete and pay for at one time, you can request a limited cash advance. In order to do so, you will need to submit a copy of your agency's cash advance policy, and the cash advance policy must meet the requirements outlined in the Notice of Funding Opportunity. If your project is requesting equipment, there is a variety of requirements to include the quote request overview form, as well as 3 quotes must be submitted for all items valued at more than $100 per unit. Please note that when you are gathering your quotes, if a vendor does not respond to you, please be sure to submit proof that you have solicited those quotes. It could be an email showing that you requested, and if they didn't respond, that's understandable, but at least show that you made the effort to solicit those quotes. Additionally, if the quote is received via phone, please make written record of the conversation and submit that as proof of soliciting the quotes. Please also refer to this document and the request for funding proposals for the additional requirements, federal requirements for the equipment. If your project is requesting overtime or backfill, You will be required to submit a current pay chart that identifies the base and overtime rates of the folks that will be receiving this funding. If your agency is requesting communications equipment, you will be required to submit your current FCC license. It must still be active and to receive eligibility. You must also submit documentation that you as the applicant have coordinated with the statewide interoperability coordinator. His name is Corey Chase, and his email has been provided on this slide, as well as other reference materials for this award notice. If your agency is requesting an increase in the quantity of HSGP funded equipment already owned by your agency, you must submit a Homeland Security Grant Program property record list. There is a template for this record list available on the website. If your agency is requesting a project where items will be assigned to or used by individual members of the department or agency, you will be required to submit a personnel roster. It must identify the name, rank, and call numbers of the individuals who will be receiving the equipment. And finally, if your request is requesting items to be assigned to a vehicle, you will need to complete and submit the department vehicle roster, which will need the vehicle plate numbers and the use of the vehicles. When requesting SUAS, or Small Unmanned Aircraft System equipment, there's a variety of different regulations that you will need to adhere to, as well as a variety of documentation you will need to provide as justification for this type of request. The first being the SUAS signature page outlined on the HSU website. This signature page, as well as the rest of the requirements on this slide, go through the different justification letters and documentation and licenses, etc., that you will need to submit along with your application materials. So please be sure, for sake of time, I will not go through all of the requirements, but please familiarize yourself with this signature page and the various requirements listed should you have a need for requesting UAS equipment. The final supplemental documentation that is required is if your request is equal to or exceeds $30,000. There is an executive compensation reporting form linked on our website that you will need to submit, and also please be sure to sign when you are doing so. Okay, so after all of your application materials have been submitted and received by the Homeland Security Unit, there's a variety of tasks that we will do internally before passing on to the Homeland Security Working Group for additional scoring and prioritization for final selection. Just a little overview on the Homeland Security Working Group. This group is made of a variety of subject matter experts from the public sector, from the private sector, state agencies, local agencies, EMS, fire, police, critical infrastructure, public utility, a variety of different subject matter experts who are able to use their expertise and review these applications to ensure that the applications selected are benefiting the state of Vermont and are meeting all of the application requirements. So in terms of the scoring of the applications themselves, please refer to the request for proposals for additional details on scoring materials. You will be able to see what materials the working group use and what criteria they are scoring. in terms of prioritizing your application. So be sure to check that out if you have additional questions on what it is that your application is being scored on. So once the working group members review and score these applications independently and apart from one another, we will convene as a group and discuss and prioritize successful applications based on the scores that were received by the various members. So we will hold a meeting to discuss what projects should be prioritized for this round of funding. Please note that this grant program is a very competitive program and we are always oversubscribed. So in creating your applications, be sure to create them in a way that may allow for your agency to receive partial funding, if not full. That is always a possibility that we can fund a portion of your project, and if we're able to do so and your application materials are complete and you have a strong application, we do look to do that if we have the funds available. So keep that in mind when you're creating your materials. Additionally, following the working group meeting, there may be additional documentation requested of the applicant based on what is proposed in your application. So please be on the lookout for any emails that may come your way asking for additional documentation or clarification on your project. So moving on to the post-award requirements, should your agency's request be approved and awarded funding, either partially or in full, here are some of the things that you will need to know once receiving your award. So again, first you will receive your grant agreement. You will go through the execution process. Your agency will be asked to review the agreement and sign it. It will then be returned to the Department of Public Safety and be signed by our internal leadership before the agreement is fully executed. The next item is only applicable to certain projects, and for the purpose of a reallocation, because the timeline is so truncated, this requirement is actually not a portion of the reallocation funding opportunity, because these environmental historic preservation reviews are very lengthy process, and because these projects for the reallocation will need to be turned around by August of 2025, we will not be accepting applications that require this type of review in this funding round. So for additional information on whether or not your organization's project would require an EHP review, please refer back to the request for proposals, and that is outlined in that documentation. The next item is only applicable to folks who are applying for cybersecurity related projects. There is a requirement made by FEMA that all cybersecurity related projects, the subrecipient take part in the National Cybersecurity Review. This is to be completed by the Chief Information Officer, Chief Information Security Officer, or the equivalent for each of your organizations. This review takes about 2 to 3 hours on average, and there is only a certain period of the year where this review is open. So please be sure before the deadline in February to take a look at that and complete this review if your application is cybersecurity related. I've provided the link to the review here on the slide, and it can be found on our website as well. The next item is progress report, program progress reports. So there is a requirement, a biannual requirement at minimum for successful subrecipients to submit a progress report, reporting on where you are in your project, if there have been any delays, if you are ahead of schedule, etc. These biannual reports are due every January 15th and July 15th. So for the purpose of this particular award cycle, there will only be one. The biannual report will only be due in July of 2025. The other occasions where a progress report is due is when you are submitting a request for reimbursement. So these awards are all reimbursement awards. So you will pay for the service or equipment up front, and you will submit for reimbursement to the Homeland Security Unit. And a requirement of those reimbursement packets is a progress report showing where you are in your overall progress, in your overall project, and you're able to report on that progress at that time as well. So, as I mentioned, request for reimbursement, there will be, if you were to receive funding, there would be a notice that came out just letting you know what is required in the request for reimbursements. Typically, as I mentioned previously, it is the progress reports, any invoices that go along with the equipment or service that you have received. There's a requirement for proof of payment, whether it be a check, an ACH payment, but there needs to be some kind of proof that you have executed the payment and that it was cleared. And there is a request for reimbursement form that keeps track of where you are in your award and how much you have previously requested, etc. The final item is for folks who are requesting equipment. There is a requirement to maintain a property records list, or also referenced as an equipment list. These assets are tracked by FEMA and the Homeland Security Unit and will need to be reported on at the end of the grant cycle. So as you're working on your project development and your application materials, if you encounter questions or you need clarification, there are a variety of ways for you to reach out to the Homeland Security Unit. You can email our grants inbox. I have referenced that a few times throughout this presentation, but it can also be found on our website. The Homeland Security Unit will also be offering a variety of technical assistance sessions where you can sign up and come in and ask your various questions, bring your materials, get clarification on anything that you might have questions on. You will see on the screen here the list of available sessions, and as well as the link to register for any technical assistance session that you may want to attend. This year, this is a bit different than prior years. If any of you are prior subrecipients, these sessions will be held one-on-one opposed to as a full group. So please be mindful when you're scheduling for sessions that you can only schedule up to 2 of these listed sessions. If you need additional help outside of these session date and times, please feel free to reach out to me, and we will coordinate and set up a time or email back and forth or whatever works best for you to get those questions answered. This concludes the 2022 Homeland Security Grant Program Reallocation webinar presentation. Thank you for joining me today. If you have any questions along the way, please reach out to the Homeland Security Unit or myself, Callie Audette, at either of the email accounts listed here on the page. Again, feel free to sign up for technical assistance sessions, reach out, call, email. We are happy to assist. I hope you all have a wonderful day.